Hello everybody and welcome to Video Clips, and we're going to have a little bit of a departure from the usual Tuesday, Thursday format, and I'm going to post more often videos on my YouTube channel because there is so much to talk about with regards to the coronavirus issue. And just a couple of things I'll mention that are coming up. First of all, we've converted our yoga business and our athletics business to a virtual online platform. You can get a free yoga sample class and a free workout, sample workout before committing if you would like to. Send me an email at pampopper@msn.com if you're interested in that. Second announcement is that we think that part of the agenda here with the coronavirus is forced vaccination, and people need to know more about that issue. I'm teaching a mini course, one evening, 2.5-hour session on that, that we've made really inexpensive, like we did the coronavirus workshop. If you're interested in that, send me an email also. And we do have, starting next week, the health class online from one of our licensed health professionals who will be conducting that class for high school students. It's 6 live classes through Zoom. So if you have a middle or high school student who you'd like to have learn about plant-based nutrition and forming habits and the relationship between how you take care of yourself and health outcomes, in other words, a real health class about real health issues, also let me know about that. Okay. Now, the article that I'm going to, or the information I'm going to provide to you today is also in our newsletter. There are 21 references to the information that I'm going to give to you. And if you would like, if you're a newsletter subscriber, you're going to have this in writing in your email box. If you're not, and you would like to have this article or subscribe to the newsletter, because I'm going to be putting a lot of these things out in the near future in the newsletter, send me an email at pampopper@msn.com. And while you're at it, you may want to sign up for a free trial membership in which you get to participate in a workshop and to get some free articles and recipes and that sort of thing. So if any of that interests you, just send me an email. Free membership, free article, sign up for the newsletter, free workout, free yoga, and the upcoming vaccine class, and the upcoming health class for middle and high school students. All right, so just to get started, I've been writing and creating videos for several weeks now concerning the inconsistencies in the public announcements about coronavirus and the factual data that indicates that actions taken by public officials and the ensuing hysteria have been completely unwarranted. And I'll continue to cite easily verifiable facts to show that this is the case. And in fact, some of you have taken the time to go to your local state public health department website and see what I'm talking about, the story that is on the websites, and it just does not match with the press conferences and that sort of thing every day. Well, according to the Centers for Disease Control's website, let's look at the flu in general. About 9% of the world's population is affected by flu annually, with up to 1 billion, that's with a B, infections, 3 to 5 million severe cases, and 300 to 500,000 deaths per year. It's estimated that 20% of Americans are affected, with 20 to 50 million documented cases per year, 225,000 hospitalizations per year, and tens of thousands of deaths every year. Historically, the elderly account for about 90% of influenza deaths, and these are data for normal years. In other words, every year this happens, you don't hear anything about it, there aren't any press conferences, the restaurants and bars aren't closed, the world doesn't come to an end, the airplanes aren't grounded, etc. Now, one season that was considered abnormal was 2009-2010, during which the swine flu was circulating, H1N1. CDC data show that there were 60.8 million cases, 274,304 hospitalizations, and 12,469 deaths from swine flu in the United States alone. It is estimated that about 575,400 people died of H1N1 worldwide during a one-year period. So it's important to keep these numbers in mind when we take a look at coronavirus, okay? As of April 4th, the World Health Organization reports that there are 1,051,624 confirmed cases of coronavirus. This is worldwide, and 56,985 deaths worldwide. The CDC reports 239,279 cases and 5,443 deaths in the United States. Now, I am not a Harvard-educated virologist and a world-renowned epidemiologist, but it seems that the response to these data is incredibly disproportionate and makes no sense at all. And I'm not the only person who thinks so, and some surprising people think so. So one of the things that I'm going to focus on this week that I think is really important is people who nobody's going to argue with their credentials, because that's become an issue. So Dr. Paul Offit, who is head of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital Philadelphia and professor of medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, let's throw some shots at his credentials, right? This guy, I think, is qualified to speak out about it, has expressed a lot of concern about this whole issue too. He says that closing the schools was most likely a bad idea. And he points out that actually the CDC never suggested this. He's concerned about the level of hysteria being ginned up with tests that are most likely inaccurate. And he says this is not the first time it happened. He also refers to the 2009-10 swine flu epidemic and the original mortality rate at the time, and this is one of the things that got people upset, but obviously not nearly as upset as they are right now. It was projected to be 4% mortality rate. However, that would be a concern, but follow-up serological studies showed that the death rate was actually 0.01%. He feels certain that this will be the case with coronavirus. It will be shown to be less deadly than the seasonal flu and less deadly than the H1N1 situation, which resulted in nothing like the lockdowns that we're experiencing right now. This is not the first time that this has happened. I mean, records show that even with the higher number of cases and deaths with H1N1, there was no reason to declare a pandemic. Now, I'll go back to that period of time, and something that I felt was very suspicious happened. And I suspected that something was not right when in 2009, the Centers for Disease Control instructed healthcare professionals to stop testing for H1N1 and to assume that anybody who presented with flu-like symptoms had H1N1 flu and to report it as such. Now, if you look online, you will see that that suggestion has already been made about the coronavirus. CDC's statement to the public was that resources should not be wasted on testing when the government had already determined that there was an epidemic. Now, at the time, what I said, and you can look at time-stamped articles that I wrote at that time, that the number of cases did not indicate that there was an epidemic, that the feds had ordered 193 million doses of flu vaccine and they needed to sell those doses to the public. And the CDC's directive to stop testing was based on the fact that the numbers were not going to add up to the fear that they had promoted, that this was going to be a horrible, horrible flu season. Well, shortly after the whole thing was over, a CBS News investigation confirmed my theory. CBS requested state-by-state testing results for the period prior to the halting of lab testing from CDC. Now, they also requested data from CDC, and CDC refused to provide the data. So under the Freedom of Information Act request was submitted to Health and Human Services, and the states were asked to provide state-by-state data too. The results when the data were finally turned over, the majority of patients were negative for both H1N1 and seasonal flu both, and the states were, even though the states were actually testing people who were deemed to be at the highest risk of having it, those who had traveled to Mexico, because that's where it was suspected that this whole thing originated in the first place. Health authorities reported that these people had colds or upper respiratory infections, but they did not have flu. The bottom line was that the predicted epidemic of flu, along with deaths and comorbidity, didn't take place, and instead of just telling the public the truth, isn't this great, we're not having an epidemic this year, the CDC used a strategy to cover up the truth. So why am I telling you this? I want to get on to what the World Health Organization did too, but the reason I'm telling you this is that we have been deceived before by the very agencies that are talking to us now every day about how horrific this situation is in order to justify the, I think, draconian measures that are being taken. So let's talk about World Health Organization. They were an active participant in this deception as well. According to the Committee on Social Health and Family Affairs of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, or PACE, the WHO engaged in fear-mongering in regards to H1N1 flu without any evidence to back its actions. As a result, approximately $18 billion was squandered worldwide. PACE determined that World Health Organization colluded with the drug companies, turning run-of-the-mill flu, as they called it, into a quote-unquote pandemic. Drug companies benefited financially. Millions of people were vaccinated without cause and without evidence that the vaccine was effective since it was not clinically tested. Testimony at a public hearing included this statement, quote, "We are witnessing a gigantic misallocation of resources in terms of public health. Governments and public health services are wasting huge amounts of money in investing in pandemic diseases whose evidence base is weak," end of quote. Epidemiologist Wolfgang Wodarg said the false pandemic is one of the greatest medical scandals of the century. Dr. Ulrich Kiel, director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Epidemiology in Munster, Germany, also agreed. The swine flu was actually much milder than seasonal flu. The CDC later reported that the death rate was 1/10 to 1/3 the death rate from the normal seasonal flu. And even though it was significantly bigger than most years, the death rate didn't, lots of cases, and I've talked about this before, but the death rate was actually significantly lower. So they fanned the flames and created a pandemic back then, and they're doing the same thing now with even weaker numbers. And again, I'll go back to what I said before. We had 60 million, almost 61 million cases, 274,304 hospitalizations, and 12,469 deaths from swine flu in the United States. And today in the US, we're talking about 239,279 cases and 5,443 deaths. I mean, there just is absolutely no way to rationalize the actions based on these numbers. Now, here's a question. Why would the World Health Organization have declared a pandemic when there was none? Not surprisingly, the drug companies influenced the response since they have always so much to gain from this kind of thing. 3 scientists who helped to develop WHO guidance on pandemic influenza preparedness had consulted for drug companies that would profit from WHO policies. These conflicts were not disclosed in a document titled WHO Guidelines on the Use of Antivirals in Vaccines During an Influenza Pandemic, issued in 2004. The WHO refused to reveal the names of members of WHO emergency committees set up to guide response to the H1N1 quote-unquote pandemic. This is concerning since the responsibility of this committee included when to change or increase the response rate. So, as usual, if you look hard enough, you'll find drug company influence in all of this mischief that goes on. Now, what I found really interesting, and I did some digging around, an additional motivation was revealed by Margaret Chan, who was at the time WHO Director General. She said in a speech that, quote, "The ministers of health should take advantage of devastating impact swine flu will have on poorer nations to get out the message that, quote, changes in the functioning of the global economy, end of quote, are needed to, quote, distribute wealth on the basis of values like community, solidarity, equity, and social justice." She further declared that the pandemic should be used as a weapon against international policies and systems that govern financial markets, economies, commerce, trade, and foreign affairs. In other words, Chan looked at fake pandemics as a form of social engineering to be executed according to her beliefs, of course. It looks like the H1N1 episode may have been somewhat of a dress rehearsal for what we see unfolding daily right now. People are panicked and hiding in their houses, convinced that what they see on television is true. They're not aware of the data I've included in this article and others, and they don't investigate for themselves. Government and health agencies and the people who are in charge of them, along with their business partners, the drug companies, have committed these terrible acts in the past and gotten away with them. Thus, they've become bolder and bolder over time. So it's not surprising now that they've reached a level of power that within a few weeks they have taken away our freedoms, the right to operate our businesses, to attend religious services, have our children educated, and literally closed the world down. And here's what I have to say about this. This time, we cannot sit idly by until the powers that be let us get back to our lives at some point and express gratitude that we can now move about as we please and then wait for them to do it again. We must commit, I think, to do whatever is possible to never let this happen again. And the statement that was made about the swine flu pandemic that never was being the scandal of the decade, nothing compared to what we see right now. So once again, if you're a newsletter subscriber, you will get a copy of this article. If you're not and you would like to have it or be a newsletter subscriber, PamPopper@MSN.com. If you would like to become a free trial member and check out our content in a workshop, you can also submit that as well. And let's really start working on building a coalition so that we can make sure that this never happens again. Thank you for watching. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy or benefit from watching it. I'll probably be back to you tomorrow with more news. I don't know if I'm going to do 5 days a week, but I'm definitely going to do more because there is so much to talk about. Thank you for watching.